Hello, I'm Percy Dove Tonsils. Now, I'm Ray Reagan. I am 58 years old. I live in Northern Virginia, and I am Pauline's youngest son. I am here tonight to talk about Pauline's sense of humor and the sorts of things that made her laugh. My mom was a very proper woman, a very reserved woman, but she liked a good joke, and she liked to laugh. And these are the sort of things that really got to her. She read a newspaper every day, and she read it from cover to cover, and that included the comic strips. And the things that she tended to like were very simple, elemental, just straight joke comic strips. Some of the ones she really liked were Andy Cap, Beetle Bailey, The Born Loser, Dennis the Menace, and Blondie. And I think maybe Blondie more than anybody else. There was a movie series that was made out of the Blondie comic strip. Maybe as many as 25 movies. They would often play in the afternoon on TV for some reason, and if one of those was on, then as she was going about her day, Blondie would be on the TV, and she'd be getting dinner ready and all. Another very simple, but again very funny series that was made in the 1950s and that played a lot on TV when I was young in the 1960s was Francis the Talking Mule with Donald O'Connor, and she liked that quite a bit too. With respect to older movies, she had a lot of favorites, a mixture of slapstick people, screwball type things. She loved Laurel and Hardy, like the Three Stooges, I think. She really enjoyed the John Wayne comedies with Maureen O'Hara. Bob Hope and Bing Crosby Road Pictures were some of her favorites. She liked some of the funnier musicals that came out. Among them The Music Man, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and Hello Dolly. I remember we used to be, if Seven Brides for Seven Brothers came on TV late at night, then we as kids would be allowed to stay up late and watch that just because it was so good and so funny. Hello Dolly was a favorite again. I think one of the big events in her life was when she was able to go see Pearl Bailey live starring in Hello Dolly. She liked old screwball comedies like Cary Grant and Irene Dunne were in. And she liked slapstick comedies from later on. Some that we remember, like Jerry Lewis's movies from the 1960s, and also The Great Race with Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis. She really liked Jack Lemmon, especially with Walter Matthau, and a movie like The Odd Couple would be another one that she really loved. There were a lot of variety shows by huge stars in the 1950s and 1960s, and she loved a lot of them too, and the comedy that they did. Some of these people would be Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca, Jack Benny, Red Skelton, and Jackie Gleason. They all had all kinds of crazy characters that they would carry from week to week. Dean Martin was a singer, but he also was very funny. And he had a whole raft of comedians who would be on his show regularly. People like Dom DeLuise, Nipsey Russell, Jackie Vernon, and Leonard Barr, who was the guy who was known as Dean Martin's uncle. And he just had a very deadpan delivery, and he just said funny things. He didn't say things funny. But she loved him. She loved him too. She loved a lot of old sitcoms. Among them would be The Odd Couple, Barney Miller, F Troop, Car 54, Where Are You? But she also liked, the Monkees, the singing group, had a sitcom in the 60s that was a very hectic, sort of chaotic show where they would do crazy stuff, like they would break the fourth wall, they would talk to people, and, they would go back, in the middle of a scene, and they would break off, and they'd go back and talk to the writers, and she liked them too, just because it was so silly what they were doing. And they were very nice young boys too. There were many ethnic comedians. This is when I was a child. There were a lot of different ethnic comedians who were around, and she loved all of them. People like Moms Mabley, Myron Cohen, Buddy Hackett, Henny Youngman. There were there were Italian comedians, and her absolute favorite was a guy named Pat Cooper, who basically his basic deal was that he was irritated at everybody in the world. Sometimes it would be an Italian punchline, sometimes an English punchline, sometimes a little bit of a salty punchline, but she loved him. Pat Cooper, like pretty much every old comedian who lasted long enough, ended up on Seinfeld once. And I bring this up because I really think my mom would have loved Seinfeld if she had lived long enough to see it. She was, despite all the supposedly taboo things that they talked about on Seinfeld, I think she would have loved it. And the reason was she really did have a sense of humor for pretty much everything. Though she was a proper person, she had a salty sense of humor. She would laugh at anything if it was presented in the right way. And basically, if something was naughty, it had to be presented as if it was naughty, and then it could be funny. If you tried to be sophisticated over something that was naughty, that wasn't going to be funny. She would be uncomfortable with that. So, the naughty shows that she really loved. Dean Martin's show. Dean was a very dirty guy. Rona Martin's Laugh-In, which was a forerunner of a lot of the controversial shows that came later. They took off on everybody and everything. They really went through every subject that was done later. Very funny, and she just loved them. Benny Hill. Nobody naughtier than Benny, but always presented things in a naughty sort of way. There was another guy, an Irishman who worked on English television named Dave Allen, who just told sort of sarcastic stories, and he would have little sketches in between the stories. He was very funny to her too. She liked Red Fox. She liked Richard Pryor. As far afield as Richard could go. She really liked him. Richard, of course, was one of the writers on Blazing Saddles. She loved Blazing Saddles and pretty much anything that Mel Brooks did, including the 2,000-Year-Old Man that he did with Carl Reiner. When we were little, as I said, we were allowed to stay up for something like a musical if it would be on. We would be allowed to stay up and watch The Tonight Show if Mel Brooks was coming on. We'd be allowed to stay up and watch a Don Rickles monologue if that was coming on. There was just laughing sort of trump sleep, even if you had to go to school the next day, and we would be allowed to do that. Like I said, she enjoyed a good joke, including a good dirty joke. To me, I think there was nobody who told her more dirty jokes, and no one who made her laugh more than my brother Jimmy. Jimmy died the same year as my mom did in 1984, and I can very easily transport myself back to the little duet that these two would have, where my mom would be sitting in her chair in our TV room reading the newspaper, and Jimmy would just sort of be sitting over in the corner, just sort of measuring her and trying to decide, what to do, what to talk about, just how basically how to attack her with a joke. And Jimmy he was somebody who could bother you just to the right point, just to the right side where it was still humor. You would be bothered, but it would still be funny. And he would always start by going, "Hey, Ma." And sometimes she would answer, sometimes she wouldn't. She'd have the paper up in front of her. But he'd go, "Hey, Ma," until finally she would say, "What?" And he would start on some sort of silliness that she would, maybe answer, maybe wouldn't. But eventually it would settle back down again, and, whatever, it would be something on TV, he'd pretend to be watching it, she'd pretend to be reading the paper, and after a few minutes again, you'd get, "Hey, Ma." And then something else would happen. He'd maybe suggest to her some place where he could drive her, or something that something that had to be done, and he'd just sort of be drawing her out. And then it would settle back down again, and then he'd try again. "Hey, Ma." And she would eventually, after nothing, she would go, "What do you want?" and then he would launch into the joke, and he would always bring her into it where she would be asking the question, and then finally he would tell a joke that I would never tell her, jokes with just the dirtiest punchlines you ever heard in your life. And she would just go back to the paper. And she would just be sitting there with the paper, and you would think that she was offended. But Mom had somewhat unruly hair, and it would stick up a little bit. And if you look closely, over the top of that newspaper, you could see that that hair was shaking up and down. It was bobbing up and down like this, and then whenever you reached around the paper and saw, pulled it away a little bit, she would be sitting there and laughing so hard that no sound was coming out of her mouth. She would be going, and she just could not stop laughing. And that's really how I remember both Jimmy and my mom, is in the living room in Dormont, Pennsylvania, where he's just told her a joke, and she is just sitting there laughing so hard that she just can't stop. And so, in closing, I just want to say, hey Ma, I got a joke for you, and I hope it's a good one. Thanks for this time, and I hope to see as many of you as I can in the last weekend in April. Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, it's more like 10 minutes.